Okie doke. So my name's John Maier, and I'm here at the University of Pittsburgh, and the charge I was given was an overview of innovation here. And so I'll talk a little bit, introduce myself and some things that I'm going to be talking about, and give an innovation of the ecosystem, or give an overview of the innovation ecosystem here at Pitt, with a focus on clinical medicine, and then talk a little bit about what we're doing going forward. So I don't have any commercial disclosures, though I wish I did. I do have a son who just finished his freshman year here, so at some level I've drunk the Kool-Aid and actually believe very much in the University of Pittsburgh and what's going on here. And about me, so you know my biases and background, I am an experimental physicist by training. I was working in a lab doing my PhD where we were actually developing technology for NIH researchers that they couldn't afford to build themselves. And so they would come to our lab and use it. And even then, I was a grad student between 1990 and 97. Once we developed something, there was a small company in town that would turn it into a product that the scientists could use and continue their work. And so that's something that's been part of my even training as a scientist. I came here to Pittsburgh after finishing those degrees and started clinical training in family medicine. So the perspective of sort of broad-based clinical medicine, I trained here at UPMC Shadyside. And then I went and worked for a small technology company for about 10 years. And I joined the university here 5 years ago in the Department of Family Medicine. So I put their name on all my slides because they essentially own me. I also work for an organization here at Pitt called the Clinical Translational Science Institute. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them. And they brought you the coffee today. And I guess it's mostly their flag that I'm carrying now. So they get to have their thing on my slide as well. In terms of introduction, I want to start by talking about innovation, right? We talk about this a lot today. A number of talks have had it in the title. People are bringing it up all the time. Anyone who submitted a grant to the NIH, it gets reviewed. One of the criteria is innovation. And their perspective on innovation is very much, is it a new idea? You know, is it something that's new in your area or new broadly? Is it an improvement, a refinement, or something new? So it's very much in this creativity kind of mindset. You know, we'll give you money for a new idea. And that's sort of half the picture with innovation, right? It's clearly this creativity focus is part of it, but there's another part of it, and that's why, you know, when you heard Mark Melandro talk about the Innovation Institute, they're talking about, you know, business and meeting a need and things like that. So when I'm talking about innovation, it's not just the creativity part, it's also this part of meeting a need, you know, addressing some new requirement, and getting down to this existing market need. And I'd say that's what really is a distinction I want to draw between what we call innovation and what I'm talking about and just invention. You know, so innovation really has both of these, take some money and come up with a new idea, but also take a new idea and have it create some more money for you. And that money comes, it's sort of the scorecard for the value of the thing you created. You know, if you solve someone's problem, they'll give you some money. So this is what I want to go with for our operating definition of innovation today. The other thing in terms of introduction is the Clinical Translational Science Institute. So this is an institute here at the University of Pittsburgh. It's been funded by the NIH, and we are in the last 2 months of the 10th year. And so over time, this has been about $180 million the NIH has invested here at Pitt. And Steve Reese is the PI of this. And just in the last couple of months, we learned that we get to do 5 more years of this. So what I'll end this talk with is what we are doing going forward in terms of driving innovation here at Pitt with some of this money. So those are the introduction things. A little bit about me, what I'm talking about when I say innovation, and then also the CTSI as an organization. So now I want to talk about the innovation ecosystem here at Pitt. And we had Chancellor Gallagher here earlier and Mark, and they both mentioned, Mark Melandro mentioned things about this, but this is so big I have to take the title bar off my slide. But it starts with the University of Pittsburgh, and we have a faculty here who's doing all sorts of things, and students. And they're working here together solving problems. You know, at some level, one of the problems the faculty is solving is educating my son. But they're also solving problems that are relevant to us as a region and us as a nation, us as a people. And those problems are really defined by stakeholders, right? Some group of people that has a challenge or something they need to overcome, and here in the business school, that gets immediately coupled to something called a market. But as this faculty and students at the university are working and doing this research, they're refining the concept of this problem and producing all these things. You know, we produce publications and grants and graduates, and Pitt is a really strong university in terms of the grants it is able to write and win, and the publications it produces. We also produce intellectual property, right? Some of this stuff isn't just in a paper, it goes into the Innovation Institute, and it gets turned into something that someone can value and eventually become a product. And so this is what the university is about. And this organization that I'm part of, the Clinical Translational Science Institute, really works with researchers to try to help them, increase the efficiency with which they can do their research, get their grants, write their publications, and do the work that they do. And so we touch a lot of the areas of the university and the areas that faculty are involved with. In particular, I'm part of a small part of that organization that's focused on developing new ways to give out funding, new ways to stimulate innovation behavior. And the key thing that I believe in and have to say every time I talk about this is we're trying to bend this research on focusing on specific problems, a problem-focused basics of research. And we're trying some novel approaches to funding and working really hard to build these teams that are necessary to be successful. So that's what CTSI is doing in this space. And you heard earlier from Mark Melandro about the Innovation Institute. So when there's something that can be patented or turned into a product, they help with the licenses and startup. They also provide a lot of training and help with business development and IP and licensing and all this. In addition to that operation and ours and the whole university, there's a number of programs that are really focused on commercialization, or I would say translation, of the research out into the world. And I've got their acronyms here. Rasu just mentioned the PHDA Center for Commercial Applications, and Mike will talk about that later, I'm sure. The Coulter program and the Center for Medical Innovations are two other programs that are specifically geared toward, finding some research here, getting the investigator involved in moving that out to the world. And these really focus on, with an interesting idea, creating that business value, providing some pre-seed funds, some early stage investment, putting an organization around the investigator, the technology, the idea, and helping to develop some business investors. So those programs are sort of sprinkled throughout the university. And combined with what we do at CTSI and the Innovation Institute, and always keeping the problem near the center, this is sort of how I envision innovation here at the university, specifically from the perspective of focusing on clinical problems. So in this ecosystem, I think this last year there were about $3 million invested in projects that people have, students and faculty. So there's a lot of investment here on campus in things in this space. And you heard Mark Melandro mention several of the programs that they have. There's a big focus on students in these programs, but a faculty member with a student can encourage that student to go into one of these competitions and have some success, do some real learning, and actually get some funding. The CCA is part of the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance. The Center for Medical Innovation is housed in the Bioengineering School, and the Coulter program is also housed there, I think in association with the Health Sciences. But these programs are focused on, clinically translating technologies and things like that. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the programs that we run out of CTSI. Pinch is our flagship program. We have a pain challenge that we have run 2 years in a row, and we just invented a new competition called Protohype. And these are sort of our three things. These are the work we're doing to try to stimulate innovative behavior, right? So we have a lot of really talented faculty members who can write NIH grants very, very well. And we're trying to give them an opportunity to make a proposal, pitch an idea that may be too risky for the NIH. We want to have a real low barrier to entry for these programs so that people can just sort of throw something out there or get together with some friends and make an application quickly, because in some of those interactions you're going to get some really interesting ideas. And so that's a theme we have as we're developing our approaches to, giving out pilot funds. And I have a video here on this next slide here. We'll see if I can play this. And this is a kind of a quick video about our pinch program.
In the heart of Oakland, there's a competition heating up, and it's called the Pinch.
Pinch is something that supports new ideas.
The whole process is quite innovative.
It's definitely allowed me to collaborate with a lot of other people.
The Pinch is the Pitt Innovation Challenge. During this competition, teams work to find solutions to challenging health problems.
I've heard more and better pitches in the last 15 or 20 minutes from different innovators than I have, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years.
Dr. Stephen Reese is Pinch's founder. He is also director of Pitt's Clinical and Translational Science Institute, which is making the Pinch possible.
The whole point of Pinch is to take really good ideas and de-risk them by putting in some funding and support so that people can get their projects forward to the next level.
Another goal is to build teams of problem solvers. Dr. Judy Cameron competed in the spring of 2014.
They would like you to bring together people that you haven't worked with before. And so that took some work, but it was also really exciting.
To enter, teams must create a 2-minute video, write a short proposal, then pitch their ideas. Dr. Ellen Beckjord won the competition in the spring of 2014.
Any one of us, needs to be able to get up and in 2 minutes clearly articulate what we do and why it's important and why we deserve funding to continue to do it.
Teams are also eligible to win thousands of dollars in research funding. Dr. John Kellum, who competed in the fall of 2014, says Pinch's non-traditional approach just works.
When you think about where a lot of innovation comes from, this idea of sort of, out of someone's garage sort of mentality, and how do you capture that in a healthcare environment? This is sort of a way of envisioning that kind of creativity.
You know that millions of Americans will have kidney attacks this year too.
So, do you have an innovative solution to a challenging health problem? Build your team and join the Pinch.
So that's our flagship program. And I don't know if you were here this morning and saw Mark Melandro talk about the history of the Innovation Institute. He said it was started, I guess in 2013, based on this committee across the university was talking about innovation. And I remember that meeting because Steve and I were in that meeting. We were on that committee, and the provost announced she was forming the Innovation Institute, and Mark got up and gave the plan. And as we're walking out of the meeting, Steve said, "Hey, I've got something interesting for you." And then he, come by. And so like a week later, I was in his office talking with him about, he's funny because he went to MIT, right? So he went to school with all these engineers, and his classmates are, running defense companies and things. And he's like, I wanted to figure out how they do things. And so one of his classmates from college and medical school runs the X Prize, right? And so he says, we need to change how we're doing research. We need to do something a little different. And so he called his friends, and we invented this based on the X Prize. But the idea of having it be more fun and low barrier of energy to get a proposal in, and you see the enthusiasm. Now, we're not trying to make everyone here do that. We're putting this out there, and we know that out of the thousands of talented people here, some of them are going to stand up and say, that's really interesting. In fact, when I look at that video, that was from our first cadre of folks, and I see people coming back and back and back. I've got one more video to show you that is actually the story of one of the teams that won, but it's a story from their perspective on what it's like to do this. And so I'll do this video, and then I'll quickly talk about
The project that we're working on is called Interaction. Specifically for the Pinch competition, we're focusing on ACL injuries or ACL rehabilitation. And so physical therapists would prescribe this to their patient, and they would basically utilize the system to tell the patient what exercises to perform, how much to perform them, and then it has motion-based sensors that would be attached to the person's joint of interest. In this case, it would be their knee, and they would utilize that to give themselves feedback on how they're doing their exercises, how many reps they do, are they going to the right flexion angle, are they doing it to the right intensity that was prescribed by their treating physician. It looks like we've got some patients here that are doing a pretty good job. Looks like they're right on the right track. We actually applied to Pinch 2 different times. The first round we made it to the finals and we weren't successful in receiving the funding, and so we went back to the drawing board a little bit and kind of resubmitted again. The second time again we made it to the finals, and this time we were really excited and pleased when we found out that we won. That information will be then relayed back to the physician. Why we did it? We had an idea that we really thought there was some potential with, but we really needed kind of that initial funding to see if that idea was really going to be valuable to anybody besides myself, right? And it basically gave us enough money to get a minimal viable product off the ground, so a prototype that we can actually hand to patients, collect this basic baseline data, and prove that yes or no, is this going to be a valuable clinical tool.
Tracy, there's never a good time to tear your ACL, but in the history of this care, now's a better time than before.
It was a very different process. I mean, most of the time you're writing long paper document that is describing in detail what am I going to do. And most of the time you have to have a lot of preliminary data to kind of supplement all that. So you have to have done probably years worth of experiments that you would then put all that data into that and say, okay, here we go. Are you interested in funding us? Now with Pinch, you basically had to come in with a good idea. And I think that's what made it fun, is that you could kind of be creative and brainstorm and say, okay, what type of needs are there out there? And then that's what they really focused on, is really solving a clinical need. What was exciting was sitting down with the other researchers and saying, okay, now how do we then, we have this idea, how do we then portray that in a way that's going to get excitement around that?
The assessment of how well the patient is doing the procedure in some kind of an automated way.
We can tell them, and Pinch did a great job of having the video competition, by having the pitch competitions, by kind of changing your mentality on how you would get someone interested and excited.
Seems to be doing well.
Now that we're kind of in the throes of this, I think they do a good job of walking alongside you, kind of in partnership, to say how can we develop this together. And they give you access to the CTSI, which gives you a lot of resources in your development, you know, a project manager who's making sure you stay on task, and really gives you the opportunity to be successful with the funding that they were given to you. Also, there's additional opportunities beyond just this project, and so they have other events that you can attend to get additional networking, additional exposure, which continues to spur that entrepreneurial mentality and exposure. I think the Pinch contest for us was what it took for us to get kind of to the next level. You know, we were kind of working on a project and an idea for a while, but it basically gave us that seed funding. It got other people involved.
So obviously we're big fans of this video format, but it's an example of trying to do things a little bit differently and give the faculty a chance to get outside of the normal comfort zone maybe and propose an interesting idea. So this is just some of our work to date. We've run 3 of these Pinch challenges now. We've got one going on right now. We've got another challenge that's focused on pain. And again, this is there's a foundation with money to invest in this. We've let RFAs for proposals before and had, you know, 1 applicant. When we changed over the format to make it, you know, send us a video, do a different thing, all of a sudden we're getting 50 proposals. So we're kind of changing the way people are thinking about and approaching funding. And our latest one is going on right now, we call Protohype. This is one where we're working with folks at the university who have a challenge, a problem. You know, I need a thing that will do this. And so we're taking those challenges and problems over to the folks at Tech Shop, and we're going to say, hey, can you build one of these? And the folks there will form teams to actually build objects that will meet these needs. And we're excited about that because it's going to be, like Rasu was saying, building some of these bridges between what happens here and what happens in the region, and we're excited about that. We've invested about $1.8 million in these projects over the years. We've got 36 active projects right now, and those projects get funding from other sources after we leave them, and we're proud to say right now we've got about $700,000 worth of follow-on funding for projects we've invested in, and that's growing. And so we're excited because we're investing in people who are able to take it to the next level. I think the last thing I'll talk about is our plans going forward. So this is sort of the state of things now. The new grant, we're going to actually have a program that's focused on innovation as a discipline, which I should have written out instead of the acronym. I'll be co-directing that with a fellow named Don Taylor, and it follows on what Chancellor Gallagher was saying. In fact, we had a quote from him, and I think a letter from him in the grant, about extending this, you know, impact of our research beyond the university and out into the world through commercial translation. And so when we talk about the Translational Science Institute, what is translational science? Well, part of it is these early stage innovations turning into products and actually getting out there through the medical industry. And we're really trying to embrace that. We're trying to work on developing this idea of the academic entrepreneur, you know, and learn some of the disciplines you need to be an entrepreneur. We've got kind of this framework for innovation, and we're going to continue developing methods and processes like pinch and prototype and various other things. We're going to be doing training, working with Wishwa and the ICRE about coursework training, but also externships. We've got, we'll have externs out down at Bakery Square working on projects out there, and we'll continue to try to accelerate the translation of some of the projects that we have where that's appropriate. So it's a grant, right? So I have aims, but I want to highlight a couple things in these lists of things. One of them is we're working with the university to develop a entrepreneurship and promotions tenure track, so that young investigator is not going to be so frightened to do something like this that they may not get tenure. So over time, that will come into being. We'll also continue to develop these contests and challenges to just do requests for proposals and things like that in a novel way, and then work closely with some of the projects to facilitate their transition through, you know, from the university into the real world, which generally involves commercialization. And with that, I'm going to just leave you with this slide of innovation at the University of Pittsburgh. Invite you to come play with any of these things. And I guess I just should hand it over to Karen, who's going to give our next talk. Is that right? Okay.